fields is going to be new password schema.save parse, pass in the values. If we didn't get a success from validated fields, so just make sure you put an exclamation point here. Let's go ahead and return an error, invalid fields. Like that. And then we can extract the password from validated fields.data. And now let's do some token validation here. So const existing token is going to be await get password reset token by token. So make sure that you import get password reset token from data password reset token. And then we can use our prop token, which we pass in as the second argument here. And we can see if we can find that token inside of our database. So if there is no existing token, we're going to return an error, which is simply saying invalid token. Like this. And now let's go ahead and check if the token has expired. That's going to be await get. That's going to be new date, right? Existing token dot expired is less than the current new date. So if it has expired, we're going to return an error. Token has expired, like that. And it's not dot expired, it's dot expires, like this. And let's now go ahead and check the existing user, which matches the password we were trying to reset for. So await get user by email from data user. So make sure you import get user by email from data user. We're gonna use existing token dot email, like this. If there is no existing user, let's go ahead and return an error saying user, actually email does not exist. So for whatever email we sent this token to reset the password, no longer matches what we have in our database. Great. And now what we can do is we can finally hash the new password and update the user. So for that, we're going to need to import bcrypt. So you can use either bcrypt or you can use bcrypt.js. I'm going to use JS because I found to have less problems with that. So let's go ahead and let's hash the password in here. So const hashed password is going to be await bcrypt.hash password, which we pass from our fields, and the salt is going to be 10. And then await database. So make sure you import database from libdatabase. .user.update, where ID is existing user.id and data is simply going to update the password to be the new hashed password. And then await database.reset .password reset token.delete, where ID matches the existing token.id. And finally, we can return a success saying password updated. There we go. And because we added the success here, we no longer have that error here for data.success. So if I'm correct, this should be working just fine, but I believe my token might have expired already. So here's what I'm going to do first. First, let's clear our URL. So let's just try what happens if I do new password without any token at all. So technically we could already, redirect the user from here, but I want to see explicitly what happens if we try to reset a password. There we go, missing token. So we are not allowing this to reset any password. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's use the email from recent to send a new email here. So let's copy this, this one, tutorial mailing, send reset email. And this should send me a new email any second. Let's go ahead and check my inbox. There we go. Reset your password. And when I click here, it's asking me for a new password. So my previous password was 123456. So this time I'm going to try 654321. Let me just confirm that I entered that correctly. 654321. I will click reset password, and that should just tell me that I have successfully resetted my password. There we go. So if I go back to login now, and if I try this with my old password, 123456, like this, it should tell me invalid credentials. Perfect. But if I try 654321, it should allow me to log in because I already have this email verified regardless if you have the email verified or not, right? You will not even get that message otherwise. Perfect. So we successfully implemented the forgot password functionality inside of our application. And I just want to confirm directly in my Prisma Studio that this is happening. So I'm going to close everything besides my user here. And let's go ahead. I just want to show the password. I don't want anything else like this. So I just want to take a look at the hashed password here. You can see how it looks now. So what I'm going to do, let me just, I have too many tabs open. So what I'm going to do now is click forgot password again. I'm going to send another image, another message to this. So send reset email. And there we go. So this one took a bit longer for me, but still it successfully sent the reset email. And there we go. I have a new password here. So let me click this link, and now we're going to focus on the password hash right here and see if we can notice it change. So now my password is 654321. So I'm going to change this to, I don't know, new password like that, and click reset password. And once this succeeds, let's go ahead and refresh our password hash. I don't know if we're going to be able to notice any change here. I'm not sure. There we go. You can see how it clearly changed to a new hash. Perfect. So it's officially updated in the database. And if I try this again with my old password, 654321, I should get invalid credentials. But if I try new password, I should be logged in inside of my application. There we go. We successfully implemented the reset password functionality. The last thing that we have to do regarding this login screen right here is two-factor authentication. Great job. All right, so to implement two-factor authentication, let's go ahead and let's visit our Prisma schema right here. And let's find the user model here. And let's go ahead and add a new field called is two-factor enabled. That's going to be a type of Boolean with the default value of false. So this is going to be used to decide whether to send the user the two-factor token when they try to log in. And another field we're going to create is a relation with two-factor confirmation model, which we are going to create. So two-factor confirmation is going to be a two-factor confirmation model relation, and it's going to be optional, so put a little question mark at the end. And now we have to create this model, but before we do that, let's create the two-factor token, which will be sent to the user's email. So this one will be exactly the same as our password reset token and our verification token. I just want to keep them in separate models. So let's call this one two-factor token. It's going to have an ID of string and a default value of CUID, email, which is a string, token, which is a unique string, and expires, which is a date time and a unique combination of email and token. And now let's create the two-factor confirmation model. So model two-factor confirmation is going to have an ID of string, ID, and a default of CUID. And it's going to have a relation with the user ID. So that's going to be a string. And a user is going to be a type of user, relation, fields, user ID, references ID, and let's add on delete cascade. So if the user model gets deleted, we're going to go ahead and also delete this two-factor confirmation if it exists. And let's also go ahead and add unique user ID. Like that. There we go. So make sure that you add the user relation here with the user, which we have not here, right here. So we have two-factor confirmation to this model. Yeah, and make sure you add the unique. Otherwise, you can see that we are getting a one-to-one relation, must be unique field or something else like that. So unique user ID. Or I believe you can also add unique here. I think it's the same thing. Yeah, but I'm going to use this method here. Great, so make sure you add this. And now let's go ahead and let's reset our database so everything is clear. So shut down the app. Let's run npx prisma generate. So we add those new models inside of our node modules. And then let's do npx prisma migrate reset to remove everything inside of our database here. And let's confirm this like that. And then let's go ahead and run npx Prisma database push like this. So this will push the new models inside of Neon database. And after you've done that, you can do npm run dev. And if you want to, you can also do command shift p and reload your Visual Studio Code window so there's no any cache. Then refresh your localhost here and it should still work just fine. And let's also prepare the Prisma Studio in another terminal. So npx Prisma Studio. That's going to open it on localhost 5555. And let me just enable all the fields to be visible. And there we go. You can see how I now have is two-factor enabled and two-factor confirmation here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new account using my tutorial name, mailing@gmail.com. So use the mail which can send the email, tutorialmailing@gmail.com. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to create an account. So we're just testing whether the rest of our application is working fine. There we go. So confirmation email was sent. There we go. Confirm your email. I'm going to click here and that's going to confirm my verification. There we go. This is the little bug that we have, but only in development. And now I believe if I go ahead and use tutorialmailing@gmail.com here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and click login, I should be able to log in just fine. Great. And now let's go ahead inside of my Prisma Studio and let's refresh this user. And by default, I should now have a value of is two-factor enabled false, and I can only change it to true. And we have the potential relation with two-factor confirmation, which right now you can see does not exist. Great. So now what we have to do is we have to create the tokens, the data, and the email for two-factor token right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go and close everything. Let's go inside of data and create a new file, two-factor token.ts. Let's import the database from as/lib database and let's export const get two-factor token by token to be an asynchronous function which accepts the token, which is a string. Let's open a try and catch block. In the catch, we're going to return null. And in here, let's get the two-factor token by using await database two-factor token, not confirmation, but find unique, where we have a matching token and return two-factor token like that. And then let's copy and paste this. Let's rename this one to be get two-factor token by email. And in here, let's get the asynchronous email and let's use find first and get the matching email like this. There we go. Great. Now let's go ahead and also create a data for two-factor confirmation. So two-factor confirmation.ts. This one is going to be a little bit different, a little bit simpler. So it's only going to have one method called get two-factor confirmation by user ID. So it's going to be an asynchronous function which accepts the user ID, which is a type of string. Let's open a try and catch block here and return null in the catch. And in here, let's get two-factor confirmation by using await database.two-factor confirmation find unique. Let me see if I can expand this even further. Okay, basically in one line like this, find unique, where we have a matching user ID. So no need to use the email or the token here because in our schema, we have an actual relation with the user. So we know this confirmation is tied to the user. So we can use the user ID directly. And let's return two-factor confirmation like that. That's all we need for two-factor confirmation here. Now let's go ahead and let's go and create a lib to generate a two-factor token. So for that, we're going to need a package called crypto. And I believe it already exists in the Node ecosystem. So you won't need to install anything. At least I don't. So I can just do import crypto from crypto. You can see how it auto completes and I didn't need to install any package. So if you take a look at my package JSON, I don't have crypto anywhere installed, right? So you should just have this in by default. And let me just import crypto actually. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's also import get two-factor token by email. So make sure you add that, which we just created in a second ago. And let's go, well, we can do it at the top actually here. So export const generate two-factor token. It's going to be an asynchronous function, which again accepts the email to where we send the actual token. And in here, let's go ahead and generate the token, but this one is going to be a little bit different because I want it to be a 6-digit number. So we're going to use crypto.randominteger, and in here we're going to write 100,000. And here's a little tip for you. When writing numbers in JavaScript, if you're having a hard time, seeing how many zeros they are, you can add underscore like that, and this is still going to be the exact same thing if we wrote 100,000 directly. So this is the same thing, but it's easier to see what it is. So 100,000. So this is going to be the start of our range, and the end of our range is going to be 1 million. Like that, to string. And let's write the expires. So it's going to be new date, get time, plus 3,600 times 8,000. So it's going to expire in an hour. Let's see if we can find an existing token by using await get two-factor token by email. And let's use the email which is passed in the props here. If we have an existing token, in that case, await database.two-factor token. So not confirmation, but token, be careful, .delete, where we have an ID which matches the existing token.id. And then we can finally create a new two-factor token. So const two-factor token is going to be await database two-factor token dot create data, and inside we can safely pass the email for the user to send the token, which is going to be a 6-digit code, and expires for when that code expires, like that. And let's return two-factor token. So if you want to, you can modify the expires for two-factor token. I think it's fine for the password reset token and the verification to last an hour. But if you want to, you can use some different math here to make it maybe 15 minutes rather than an hour if this is too long for you, right? But for the tutorial, I'm just going to use an hour. But let me add a little to do here. Later change to 15 minutes, just so you get reminded that, if you actually plan on doing stuff like this in production, it would be smart to make this expire a bit sooner. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's create a mail util for this. So inside of lib, let's go to mail here, and let's go ahead and export const send two-factor email, two-factor token email. And let's make it an asynchronous function, which accepts the email, which is a string, and a token, which is a string, like that. And then in here, let's add const confirm link to be HTTP localhost 3000 /auth. Actually, no, we don't have the confirmation link here, right? My apologies. It's just a token. So the email is just going to be, this is your confirmation code and a 6-digit number. So let's just do await resend emails send from onboarding at resend.dev to email subject 2FA code and HTML. Open backticks, write a little paragraph here, and it's going to be your 2FA code, and stringify the token which we send from the props. That's it. Great. So what we have to do now is we have to manually enable two-factor authentication for one of the users which we have in our database. So make sure you have Prisma Studio running. Go inside of your user model here. Find the user which you have, make sure it's registered using credentials, so make sure that you verify the email for it and everything, and change the value of is two-factor enabled from false to true. And click save one change here. And wait for a second for this to update, and there we go. Now it should be true, and you can of course refresh just to confirm that you have the newest value. There we go, is two-factor enabled is now true. So as you already know, I can freely log in with this email. As you can see, I'm already logged in. So I just signed out, but I should not be able to log in that easily if I have two-factor enabled. So it's one way to prevent that in login.ts, which we are going to do. But the first place I want to prevent it is in auth.ts in the callback sign in, where we added to do add two-factor authentication check. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to add if existing user dot is two-factor enabled. In that case, what we have to do is we can just easily return false first. So let's check if that is working. So I'm going to use tutorial mailing at gmail.com 123456, and because I changed that to true in my database, there we go, something went wrong. So I should not be allowed to log in if I have two-factor enabled. But this isn't exactly useful, because once they confirm their token, how exactly are we going to allow them to log in? Well, we're going to use that first by importing get two-factor confirmation. So import get two-factor confirmation by user ID, like that, and I'm going to use the @ sign. So import it from data two-factor confirmation. So don't accidentally use two-factor tokens here. In here we need the confirmation. So what we're going to do here is for now remove the return false, and instead let's go ahead and see if we have the confirmation. So const two-factor confirmation is going to be await get two-factor confirmation by user ID and pass in existing user dot ID, like this. Great. And let me just expand this so we can see this. Basically it's all in one line, like that. It's a long line. And now if we don't have two-factor confirmation, then return false. Otherwise, I'm going to add a comment, delete two-factor confirmation for next sign in. Obviously, this is my choice of doing this, right? So every time the user logs in, if they have two-factor authentication, I'm going to go ahead and delete the two-factor confirmation for them. So the next time they log in, they have to do the same thing over again. If you want to, you can of course modify that by going inside of Schema Prisma here. And for example, you can add expires field here as well to be a date time. So I'm not going to do this in this tutorial, but I'm just giving you some tips. You can do that if you want to, and make it work exactly the same as it would with our other tokens. So when you go ahead and generate the two-factor confirmation, where is that? Oh, we don't generate it yet, so we're going to do that later. In there, you can add the expires in maybe, I don't know, 2 days or something like that. But I think it's safer for two-factor to be very strict. So that's how I'm going to do it. So if the user successfully logs in and they have two-factor confirmation, in that case, let's do await database.two-factor confirmation.delete, where the ID is two-factor confirmation.id. As simple as that. And then we can go ahead and, well, we don't have to do anything because we have returned true at the end. So if it skips this, that means that the other one is true. So just by adding this code, I should still not be allowed to log in because I shouldn't have the two-factor confirmation. So I'm going to add a console log two-factor confirmation, and I'm going to log that inside of an object so it's easier to see. So let's check it out. If I go inside of my terminal here, let's go ahead and click login again, and I should see undefined for that value. Let's scroll above the error here, or null. There we go. So you can see the object here. Let me just scroll up again. There we go. So it's right here. Two-factor confirmation is null. And because of that, we do an if. If there is no two-factor confirmation, we prevent the user from logging in. Perfect. That is exactly what we want. I'm not allowed to sign in, and I shouldn't be. So what we have to do now is we have to improve the behavior which happens when user clicks login here. They should not get an error because they have two-factor authentication. Instead, this should change to be a code input which they will receive from their email. So let's go ahead and do that now. So what we have to do is we have to go inside of actions, login right here. So let's import generate two-factor token. So generate two-factor token from libtokens, or we can reuse this one like that. And let me collapse them. There we go. So make sure you have generate verification token and generate two-factor token. And besides that, I also have mail here. Great. So we're also going to import send two-factor token email like that. So make sure you have send two-factor token email and generate two-factor token here. And in here, what we're going to do is after we check whether the user has been verified or not, but before we try to log in here, let's add if user, existing user dot is two-factor enabled, and if we have user.email, existing user.email, in that case, let's do const two-factor token is going to be await generate two-factor token from existing user email, and then await send two-factor token email, and let's use two-factor token.email as the first argument and two-factor token, which is the 6-digit code, as the second argument. And let's return a special object two-factor to be true, like that. So it's going to break the function and it's going to give our front end a specific value so that we know we have to change the display right here. So let's go ahead and try that out now. So I'm going to go ahead and log in again. And this time I shouldn't get an error. Instead, it should just stay empty like this, but I should get a new email. There we go. Your 2FA code. And here we have a 6-digit number. Perfect. So now what we have to do is once the front end receives this value two-factor to be true, we have to modify these inputs so that we can enter that code. So for that, what we have to do is we have to revisit our schemas. So let's go inside of schemas index.ps right here. Let's find the login schema and let's add a third field, which is going to be code. And this one is going to be optional. So z.optional here, and let's add z.string inside. So very simple like that. Great. And we can also add, well, actually, no, let's just leave it like this. And now that we have added that, make sure you did that to login schema. We can go back inside of components, Auth login form right here. And in here, let's go ahead and let's add a new state here. So above the error, let's go ahead and let's add show two-factor and set show two-factor. And use state by default is going to be false like that. And then let's go ahead and modify our onSubmit function a bit. So inside of here, I'm going to do the following. If I have data question mark error, I'm going to reset the form. So we have some better user experience here. And I'm going to set the error to data.error. Then if I have data success, I can also reset the form. And I can set success to data.success. And last one here is going to be if data has two-factor. In that case, we are not going to reset the form because we need the credentials that user just wrote. And then set show two-factor is simply going to be true like that. And we can also add a little dot catch here. So in case anything else goes wrong, let's set error to be something went wrong. Like this. Great. And now what I want to do is I want to display a different form field if we need to show two-factor. So let's go ahead and change this, and let's go ahead and wrap this form field and the password form field, so the entire thing like that. And let's go ahead and wrap it inside of a fragment. So go here because there's two items, so they need to have a parent like that. And let's just go ahead and indent those like this. So two of these elements should be inside of a fragment. And then we're going to go ahead and give this a conditional if not show two-factor, then go ahead and render those, and you can wrap them in parentheses if you like. I'm going to do that as well. There we go. So we are going to render the form field password and the form field email. Where is it? Right here. Only if we didn't get the two-factor from the backend. And now let's do the opposite one. So if we do have show two-factor, in that case, let's just go ahead and copy and paste an existing form field like email here. So copy this one and let's paste it inside. And let's go ahead and give it a name of code. And let's give this two-factor code label. Let's change the placeholder to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's change the type and we can just remove it. And let's also give it, oh, it already has disabled is pending. Great. So let's take a look at it now. So if I use tutorialmailing@gmail.com now and try to log in, I should receive two-factor true, and this should change the input for me to enter my two-factor code. There we go. And I should be getting a new email here with my new two-factor code. So now we have to find a way to enter two-factor code here so that next time we click login, we actually verify the code. And I also want to change this label here. So I'm going to go ahead and find where I wrote login. I'm going to change this if show two-factor. In that case, it's going to be confirm. Otherwise, it's going to be login. So this should now say confirm. Perfect. But if we just enter the code and confirm, it's not going to work. So what we have to do is we have to go back inside of our login action. So inside of actions login right here. And let's find where we destructure the fields. So validated fields.data here at the start. Besides destructuring the email and password, we can also now destructure the code, which might or might not exist, right? So here's what we're going to do. Inside of this if clause, where we check for two-factor token and we send the two-factor token email, we're going to do the following. So in here, I'm going to add an if clause if I have the code to do verify code, else we're going to send the two-factor code like that. So that's how we're going to differentiate if the user just pressed on login or if the user logged in again, but this time provided us with the two-factor code. So we can do that check inside of here. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing we have to do is we have to import get two-factor token by email using data two-factor token like that. All right, and let's go ahead inside of here in this to do, and let's go ahead and see const two-factor token that we have saved in our database for this user using await get two-factor token by email using the existing user.email. So we know what's the code. So what we're going to do is if there is no two-factor token, we're going to return an error, invalid code. And then if two-factor token.token is not same to what the user just wrote in the code field, we're also going to return an error saying invalid code. And then what we can do is check if the code has expired. So has expired is going to be new date two-factor token dot expires is less than new date from now. So if the token has expired, regardless if it's correct or not, we're going to return error code expired. Great. And then finally, we can remove the two-factor token and we can create the two-factor confirmation so that user can finally log in. So let's go ahead and write await database.two-factor token.delete where ID matches two-factor token.id, and let's go ahead and import db. So I don't have that, so import db from /lib database. So first we're gonna go ahead and delete this one, And then let's go ahead and see if we have an existing confirmation. So const existing confirmation is going to be await database two-factor confirmation dot find unique. Actually, you know what we can use? We can use get two-factor confirmation by user ID directly, right? We have that util. So go ahead and import get two-factor confirmation by user ID from data two-factor confirmation. So in here, let me zoom out. We're going to pass in the existing user.id, or I can separate that like this. There we go. So get two-factor confirmation by user ID. If we already have an existing confirmation, we're going to go ahead and remove it from here as well. So get two-factor confirmation dot delete where ID matches existing confirmation dot ID. Like that. And once we've done that, we are finally ready to go ahead and do await database two-factor confirmation dot create where, data user ID to be existing user dot ID. And we're not going to return anything because what we want is to create the two-factor confirmation. This else is going to be skipped. And then what we're going to do is try and log in. And because we're going to create the two-factor confirmation just before we try to log in, the next time the user goes ahead and triggers inside of auth.ts the sign in callback, guess what? We're going to be able to find two-factor confirmation. And this is going to be skipped. And we're going to delete the two-factor confirmation and we're going to return true. So let's go ahead and test that out. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my login page here. I'm going to repair my emails. I'm going to use tutorial mailing gmail.com. I'm going to log in here. This will send my two-factor token on my email. So let's just wait. There we go. There we go. 2FA code. I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to paste it here and I'm going to click confirm, this time with a code. And let's see if that's going to allow me to log in now. Let's wait a second. And there we go. We are officially logged in and we confirmed our two-factor authentication. And inside of my Prisma Studio, I should not be having any two-factor confirmations. So you can see that this no longer exists. So if I log out and log in, I'm going to require that again. And let's go ahead and look at two-factor token. They don't exist either, like that. So if I go ahead and try this again, so tutorial mailing at gmail.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I go ahead and log in, I'm going to be prompted with two-factor again. And if I refresh on the two-factor token here, we now have a two-factor token and we can see what is our secret 6-digit number here. We still don't have any two-factor confirmation, but I do have a new code here. So let me copy this. Let's paste it here. Let's confirm it like that. And what this is going to do is remove my two-factor token, and it's also gonna create and then immediately remove my two-factor confirmation. So we actually didn't even see, but this definitely existed for a second before it was immediately removed by the login callback. And there we go, the old two-factor token has been deleted. And let's try one more thing. If I go back inside of my user here and change is two-factor enabled back to false and click save changes here. And if I sign out now, and if I try this again, tutorial mailing at gmail.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this should allow me to log in freely without having to enter two-factor authentication. There we go. So I recommend that you keep it like this for now, just so you can easily log in and log out. Perfect. So we just wrapped up everything we needed for the out screen here. What we're going to do next is we're going to create the actual inside screen where we're going to have an example of a server component and how we can fetch the currently logged in user, a client component, and we're also going to have the settings page where we can change the new email and the new password. And don't forget, we also have to come back inside of our login button here and enable so that we can change the mode to a dialog instead of redirecting to this screen. Great, great job. So just before we create the inner page, let's go ahead inside of our libtokens.ts here And let's go ahead and do this to do, which says change to 15 minutes. But I don't want to do 15 minutes. I actually want to do 5 minutes to improve the security even more. So we just have to change to 5 times 60 times 8,000, which will turn into milliseconds representing 5 minutes. Great. So now what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and log in using your credentials like this. So let me just log in, and I don't have my two-factor enabled, so I can just freely log in. And we already know how we can get the current session inside of app protected settings page by using await auth. But what if we want this to be a client component? How will that work exactly? So let's go ahead and remove asynchronous from here, and let's change this to simply be an empty object. And then let's go ahead and mark this as use client. And we also have to remove this action from our form. We can no longer use that, and we can also remove these imports like that. There we go. So now we have, well, a pretty much unusable settings page here. So what we have to do is we have to add use session from next Auth React. So that's how you can use the session in client components. But if you click save here, you're going to get an error that use session must be wrapped in a session provider. So we can do that inside of our app layout right here. But keep in mind, you don't have to do it in the layout file. So if you only want one part of your application to be wrapped inside of that provider, you can do that here. You can create a layout in the protected, and we are going to do that later. We're going to create a layout here. So perhaps you can wrap it there. But it really doesn't matter for this tutorial. So now let's go ahead and let's import the session provider from next Auth React. And let's also import Auth from @/auth. And then in here, let's turn this into an asynchronous function. Let's get the session using await auth. And then let's wrap our entire HTML inside of a session provider. And let's go ahead and pass the session to be session, like this. And then once this refreshes, there we go. You can see that we have the exact same thing we had before, but this time using a completely different method. So our settings page is a client component which uses use session. But one thing that is still not working is the sign out button. So I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can do this. The simplest way in a client component is to also import sign out from next/auth React. And then you can add const on click here, sign out. And then simply, well, we can remove this form now and give this button an on click, like that. So if I try and click sign out now, there we go. I am signed out. And I'm going to show you another method that you can use, which is the combination of a client component and server actions. So you can do this if you want to. You can go inside of your actions and create a new file, logout.ts, mark this as use server, import sign out, not from next Auth React, but from /auth, and export const logout. And in here await sign out. So we have to turn this into an asynchronous component. So why would you want to do this? Well, this is if you want to do some server stuff before you log out the user, right? So some server stuff, right? And that's what's cool about server actions, because this live completely separated from the JavaScript bundle. So you can do some stuff like, I don't know, clearing some information about the user, removing the user, whatever you want to do before you log out the user. So that's another way you can do that. And then what you can easily do here is simply import that logout from the actions logout. And then you no longer need this. Like that. So you can try that out, sign out, and it's still working great. So now what I want to do is I want to bring your attention to this use session hook right here. And you can see that in order for us to access the currently logged in user, we have to go to .data and then .user. Right, so that can get pretty annoying. So every single time we need the user, we would have to write session.data ?user. Every single time we would have to do this just to only get this information which we need from the user, which is the role, the ID, the image, and the email and the name. So what I want to do is a reusable component a reusable hook called useCurrentUser. So let's go ahead and do that. In the root of your application, create a new folder called hooks. And then inside, create a new file, useCurrentUser.ts. In here, import the use session from next Auth React and simply export const useCurrentUser. And let's go ahead and get this session using use session. And we are simply going to return session.data user, so we don't have to write that every single time. And I'll go back inside of app protected settings page. And instead of using session, change this to be the user and use current user from hooks use current user, and you can remove this import from here and then simply stringify the user. There we go. So we just created a reusable hook which we can use in every single client component to quickly get access to the currently logged in user with their ID, their role, whatever we want. Perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create we'll style this a little bit better, right? So I want to go inside of this app here, settings, and let's go ahead and, well, for now, remove this stringifying JSON. Let's just leave the sign out button and let's create a class name here to be BG white padding 10 and rounded XL, for example. So it's not really visible now, but it is going to be visible when we create a layout inside of this protected folder. So go ahead and create layout.tsx right here. Let's go ahead and export the protected layout. Let's get the children. Let's just not misspell children. And inside of here, I'm going to add a div and simply render those children. Now the errors should go away. And let's create an interface protected layout props to get the children, which are type of React.React node. So we can simply assign that here, protected layout props. There we go. So now I want to go ahead and change this layout a bit. So give this a class name of hfull width full flex whole and gap y10. And let's also give it items center and justify center. And then you can go ahead and give it any background color which you like, for example, this one, or I'm just simply going to copy the one that I have inside of my Auth layout here. So it's that nice gradient right here. I'm going to copy that and replace it here. Of course, that's not important for this tutorial. Great, so now we have that. What I want to build now is the navbar component. So I'm simply going to prepare it here above the children and write navbar like this. And obviously it's not defined, so we're going to get an error. So let's go inside the protected folder and create a new folder underscore components. And inside of here, a new file, navbar.tsx. So the reason I'm putting it here and the reason I'm using this convention, well, the reason I'm using this convention is because I'm writing this inside of the app folder, meaning that anything inside of a folder can easily become a route if I accidentally name a file page. So this is a good convention for you to use, as I explained in my second chapter of this tutorial, where we went over all different kinds of folders that exist in Next.js. And I'm only going to use this navbar inside of this folder. So that's why I'm not putting it here in the components. It's not exactly reusable. So in here, let's go ahead and let's mark this as use client, and let's export const navbar, and let's return a div navbar component. Then you can go back to your protected layout here and import the navbar component from /components navbar, and there we go. You should no longer be getting any errors. Instead, you should clearly see the navbar component. Perfect. So now let's go inside of this navbar component and let's go ahead and create some items inside. So first of all, I'm going to give this a class name of bg secondary flex justify between items center, adding 4 rounded extra large, width of 600 pixels and shadow SM. So I'm not gonna make this inner content responsive. That's not the point of this tutorial, right? This is just something to demonstrate how we can use our current session inside of different types of components. And this specific component is simply gonna be used to navigate to different items and to have a little user button from where we are able to log out. So inside of this navbar component, create a div with a class name flex and gap x2. And then here, outside of that div, render a paragraph user button. So this is where our user button will be, which is going to be a reusable component, which we're going to create very soon. So inside of here, let's go ahead and let's import button from components UI button, and let's import link from next/link, but I believe that is a default export like that. And let's also import use path name from next navigation so that we know where we are. So let's get the path name here, use path name. And now we're always going to know on which page we are. So if I go ahead and add a button here, and let's go ahead and give it an as child prop. Inside, let's add a link component and an href to go to /settings where we currently are, and a text settings. There we go. We now have a button which will lead us to the settings page, which we are currently on. And now what I want to do is dynamically change the variant of this button just to simply indicate whether we are on this page or not. So I'm going to write variant is going to check if the path name is /settings. In that case, it's going to be default. Otherwise, it's going to be outline like that. So it's all in one line like this. And you can see that nothing changes because we are on that page. So now I'm going to copy this button here. And I'm going to put it as the first button. And this one is going to check if we are on a server component example. And let's change this to /server and change this to server as well. And there we go. You can see how now we have a server navigation here. If you click, of course, you're going to get a 404 because it does not exist. So let's copy and paste this button as well. And let's change this new one to go to /client and check for the client component. So this is where we're going to put our server component example. This is where we're going to put our client component example. And the last one is going to be our admin. So let's change this to /admin, admin, and admin. Like that. So very simple. We're not going to complicate it any further than this. And now let's create a reusable user button component. But before we do that one, I want to create a reusable logout button. So let's go ahead and go inside of components, out, and just as we have the login button, it would make sense that we have a logout button. So we can reuse that and wrap it around anything that we want. So let's mark this as use client, and let's create an interface logout button props to have optional children and export const logout button. Let's assign those, so logout button props, and let's simply extract the children. And then in here, I'm simply going to call onClick, and I'm going to import that logout from my actions, which we've created in the settings page right here when I demonstrated you an alternative way of logging out. So you can use this method, or you can import sign out from next out React and then called sign out here. It's exactly the same, right? But this actions method allows you to do something on the server side before you log out the user. So I'm simply going to use that just to show you different ways of doing things. And in here, we're simply going to return a span, which will render the children, and onClick is going to be onClick. And let's give it a class name of cursor pointer. Great. So now I want to create a reusable user button component, which will use this logout button around one of the fields when we click on our image. So let's go inside of our terminal here, and let's go ahead and run the following. So let me just zoom out. Let's add npx Часть and UI latest add drop-down menu. So we're going to need this to open up the menu when we click on the user button, right? So we'll wait for this to install. And besides this, we're also going to need an avatar component. So make sure that you have the drop-down menu and the avatar inside of your project. And now let's go ahead and let's go inside of components, Auth, and create a new file, user button.tsx right here. So inside of this component here, let's mark it as use client. And let's go ahead and let's import everything we need from add components UI drop-down menu. So in here, we need the drop-down menu itself, we need the drop-down menu content, we need the drop-down menu item, and we need the drop-down menu trigger. So we can open it by clicking on something. And let's also go ahead and prepare all the imports we need from components UI avatar. So basically those two new components which we've just added. So avatar, avatar image, and avatar fallback. Like that. Great. And now let's go ahead and export const user button here. And let's go ahead and return a div user button. And now I want to add it inside of our reusable, well, not reusable navbar components, inside of protected components navbar. Instead of rendering a text user button, let's import the user button component from components Auth user button, and it's going to be a self-closing tag. So import the user button from here, go back to the user button, and now we can clearly see what we are developing right here. Great. So let's change this to be a drop-down menu. And now let's add a drop-down menu trigger. And inside of here, we're going to go ahead and add an avatar component. So let's add an avatar component. Let's add an avatar image component, which is for now simply going to have an empty source. And let's add an avatar fallback component like that. And inside you can write, anything you want if the image doesn't load, or you can put any icon. For example, we can import FA user from React icons FA. So if I render FA user here, there we go. You can see how we have a little user icon. So let's give this avatar fallback a class name of VGSky500, and let's change this to class name text white. There we go. So it matches our background. If you want to, you can also put that gradient that we reused a couple of times in our project. Great. So now, in order to fill this avatar image source, since this is a client component, we can use our reusable hook. So const user is going to be used current user. And there we go. We now have access to the user. So we can write user dot image or undefined like that. And you can see that nothing has changed because obviously I don't have any image inside of this user, but we are going to test out GitHub and Google login so you can see how the image is automatically going to be shown here. So now go outside of the drop-down menu trigger and let's create the drop-down menu content, which is very simply going to use our reusable logout button, which we just created. So I'm going to change this import to go to components Auth because I like to be consistent and to indicate that this is a set of reusable components which we store in this Auth folder here. Great, and inside of this logout button, we are very simply going to use the drop-down menu item and write logout like that. So make sure that you have the drop-down menu item here. And now when you click on this, there we go, you have the option to log out. And let's go ahead and just align this content a bit better. So let's give it a class name of width 40 and align of end. And you can also add a little icon here. So you can use React icons, you can use Radix icons, you can use Lucid, whatever you want. So I'm going to use Radix icons, Radix UI React icons, because I have that installed. If you have Lucid icons, you can use Lucid React, I believe, it doesn't matter. And let's go ahead and simply add an exit icon here, and let's just style it a bit like that. And there we go. You can see how now we have a logout button which is working. And if I try and log in with my social right now, so I pressed on GitHub here, that will log me back in. And there we go. You can see how I have my image loaded right here. Perfect. So we just wrapped up the beginning of our inside application here. What we're going to do next is we're going to create an example of a server component. So how to use all of these hooks and stuff in servers, how to use that in client, how to handle admin stuff. And lastly, we're going to modify this settings page right here. Great job. So now let's go ahead and let's create our server example. So in this example, I'm going to show you how to fetch the current user using a server component and how to fill some information. So let's go inside of the app folder protected and let's create a new folder called server. And inside of the server, create a new file page.tsx. Let's go ahead and export the server page. and let's write server page inside. And now when you click inside of your navbar here, you should be redirected to the server without 404. Just confirm that your URL is /server. Make sure that this folder name is server. Make sure in your navbar that you are redirecting to /server in the href here and that your path name is matching. Great, so we already know how to fetch the session, right? So we have to mark this as an asynchronous function, and then we do session, and then we do await auth from @/auth, and then inside of here what we can do is JSON.stringify and paste that session inside. So we already know how to do that. We can see the information here, but we have the same problem. If we want to get just the user, we have to go to data, and then we have to fetch the user. Is it session.user or this, right? So you can see that we still need an additional step here. So let's go ahead and improve that by creating a reusable lib for server components. Just as we created a reusable lib for client components, let's go ahead and create a reusable lib called auth.ts inside of the lib folder. And in here, let's go ahead and let's import auth from @/auth, and let's export const current user to be an asynchronous function, which will, make this an arrow function, which will get the session using await auth and simply return session.user like that. And then we can go back to our server page, and in here, so it's located in app protected server page, and in here, instead of using this, we can use user to be await current user from libauth, and we can remove this import, and then we can use the user inside like this. And there we go. Now we get just the user like that. So you can see the difference is that when we're using this auth, we have session ?user, but when we use session from nextauth react, we use session.data.user. So in case this changes in the future, you never know. You can try it yourself. Maybe it will change to user, right? But for now, for me, it's .data and then .user like that. Great, so now we have this, and what we can do now is we can create a reusable component called user info. So you can put this pretty much everywhere. You can create it inside of this components, you can create it inside of this components. I don't know, I'm just going to put it inside of auth, even though it's not exactly reusable for auth. So perhaps simply put it inside of components. It really doesn't matter. So user info.tsx, and this is going to be an agnostic component. So we're not going to define whether this is a client or server component. We're not going to care. It's going to become either server or client depending on the parent. So if the parent page is a server component, and if you import a component which doesn't have anything defined, that component will also be a server component. But if you import it inside of a page which has use client at the top, then the component will automatically become a client component, right? So for now, make sure that the server page doesn't have the use client, and we're not going to care about what this is. And let's go ahead and create an interface user info props, and the optional user which it can accept is going to be our extended user from @/nextauth. So if you remember, we have this nextauth DTS, and in here we export a type extended user where we assign the role, right? So then we can use that as the expected type here. So we don't have to manually write, user and extend the role manually. We can just reuse this. All right. So it's going to accept the user and an optional, actually a required label, which is a string. And let's export const user info here. And let's go ahead and destructure those props. So user info props will accept the user and the label. And let's go ahead and return a card from ./UI card, which we already have installed, or components UI card, however you want it. Let's render this card, and let's render the card header from components UI card as well. So make sure you add this import. And inside, we're going to add a paragraph with a label, and let's give this a class name of text to Excel, font semi-bold, and text center. And now let's go back to our app protected server page right here. And instead of rendering this, let's render user info from components user info, as I've added this export here. And let's go ahead and pass in the user to be user. And let's pass in the label to be, for example, server component, like that. And if you want to, you can add a little emoji here. Let me just open this up. For example, we can use a laptop or something like that. So server component, and there we go. Now we have a label that this is a server component. Great. So let's go back inside of the user info and let's actually develop this. So I want to give this card a class name of width 600 pixels and a shadow of medium, just so it looks a tiny bit better, so it matches our navbar here. And now we're simply going to render a bunch of information for the user, so you can see that we can easily access all of that. So below the card header, add the card content, which you can import from here. So yeah, I mean, you're practically done with everything that we have to learn about Auth. All I'm going to teach you now is, how to render that information and how to render, admin stuff. For example, we're going to create some reusable components for the admin. But yeah, if you're just looking at how to create a login and stuff, you're done. Yeah, you don't have to watch further. But if you're interested in stuff like this, continue watching. So we have space y4 here, and now let's create a div with a class name here, flex row, items center, justify between, rounded LG, border, padding 3, and shadow small. And inside of here, we're going to create a paragraph representing what we are trying to show. So this is going to be an ID of the user, which is going to have a text small and font medium, like that. And then we're going to create a paragraph here, which is going to render user.id, like that. And there we go. We have the user ID here. So let's go ahead and give this a class name of truncate in case the ID gets long. Text extra small, max width is going to be 180 pixels. Font is going to be mono. Padding is going to be 1, BG slate 100, and rounded medium. There we go. So now we have a nice little representation of our ID here. And now we can just copy and paste this entire div and render the next item, which is going to be the username. So user.name right here. There we go. We have the name. And what I recommend you actually do for now is log out if you're using an Auth and go inside of your credential login, because we're going to have to show different things depending on whether we're logged in as credentials or as something else. So let me try this again. So I should be redirected to the settings page. And if I go to the server here, there we go. I can see my new name and everything. Perfect. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this again. So this one is going to be our email, and it's going to render user.email here. There we go. We have the email, and let's go ahead and copy it again. This one is going to be our role. So we can get user.role here. There we go. You can see how it says user here. And let's go ahead and do the last one, which is going to be our two-factor authentication, like that. And inside of here, we're going to render user is two-factor. Oh, so we didn't extend the user to have the status of two-factor authentication here. So for now, let's simply write off like that. And let's go ahead and go inside of our Auth file so we can extend the callbacks here, right? So we need to extend the token, and we need to extend the session here to accept whether the user has two-factor on or off, so we can render that. So we can easily do that by adding token dot is two-factor enabled to be existing user is two-factor enabled, like that. And then in here, we can copy and paste this and check if we have token is two-factor enabled. And if we have session.user, in that case, let's go ahead and add user is two-factor enabled is going to be token is two-factor enabled, like that. And let's actually just check for session user, because this can be false, right? So we don't want to mess that up. So all in one line like this. And now obviously we have to go back inside of our next auth.d.ts and add the is to factor enabled to be a boolean like that. And then we can change this to be as boolean like this. And now the errors are gone. And you can see how our session.user now expects the property is to factor enabled. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's go back inside of our app protected server. Components user info here. And then in here, we can check if user is to factor enabled on, otherwise off, like that. Perfect. So let me just style this is to factor enabled a bit. If you want to, you can leave it like this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a new component from chat.cn called badge. So npx chat.cn UI latest add badge like this. And then I'm gonna go ahead and import the badge from ./UI badge or components UI badge. And then in here, instead of rendering it inside of a paragraph here, what I'm gonna do is render a badge. So we have like a clear indicator. So variant, if user is to factor enabled, we're gonna use success, otherwise destructive. And I think we don't have the variant success, so we are getting this error here. So what we have to do is we have to go inside of the badge component. So inside of your components UI badge right here, let's simply add a new variant here. So success is going to be border transparent, BG emerald 500, and text primary foreground. And then inside of your user info, you will no longer have an error for the success variant because it can exist. So make sure that you added success and that you wrote success here. Like this. There we go. So you can see how now it says off, like it's a danger thing. So let me just see if I have my Prisma Studio running. I don't. So let me go ahead inside of the terminal here and run npx Prisma Studio like this. And I'm going to find my user here. And I'm going to go ahead and enable two-factor authentication for this user. So true, save the change. And once I refresh here, there we go. You can see that now two-factor authentication is on. Perfect. So that's it. We finished an example of how to, use user data in a server component. So basically all we need to do is we need to use our hook, not in the, is it server here? Yeah, so await current user, our lib current user, which gets the session like that, as easy as that. Now let's go ahead and copy this server component and paste it here and rename it to client. And what we have to do now is we have to replace this with client page. And we have to mark this as use client. So this will be a client component that you have, right? And we've already done this, but I just want to explicitly tell you now. So you can here use current user like that. And that's it. That's absolutely it. So when you click on the client here, there we go. We have exact same information. And let's just change this client to actually tell you that it is a client component. And let's use a different icon like a phone, for example. There we go. So this is a client component, this is a server component, and we can get the exact same information using different methods, one with a hook and one with a lib. Perfect. So we just wrap server and client components. What's left is to create admin example, where I'm going to create another reusable component called role gate. So you can specifically hide some content from normal users by using that component. And we're going to demonstrate an API call being protected for admins and a server action being protected for admins only. And then lastly, we're going to create our settings. Now let's go ahead and let's create an admin example. So in order to do that, we have to create the admin page. So let me just reload my window. I have some errors in the cache, it seems. And let's go and inside the protected here, create a new folder called admin, like that. And inside of here, let's go ahead and create a new file, page.tsx. And let's go ahead and let's mark this as use client, and let's export const admin page here. And let's return a div admin page. Like this. And now when you click on the admin here, oh, my apologies. So yeah, whenever you're working with pages, you have to do export default. Like this. There we go. Great. Now we have our admin page here. And now what I want to do is I want to create separate hook and separate lib to directly fetch the role, right? So let's go ahead and do that. First, since we marked this as use client, let's go ahead and go inside of our hooks and let's create use current role.ts. So if we don't want to fetch the entire user, well, here's the thing, we are not fetching the user here, we are simply decoding the session. So that's important to know. You're not making any unnecessary API requests. But you know, just in case you want a specific hook to get the role, you can do that as well using the exact same method. So what you have to do is import use session from next Auth React and export const use current role like this. Get this session to be use session, and then simply return session.data user role. Like that. That's it. And then you can go back inside of that admin page. And in here, you can get the role using use current role. And I can then write current role is gonna be role. And there we go. Current role here is user. Perfect. And let me now show you an alternative way of doing it by creating the lib for this. So let's say this is a server component. For that, you would go inside of the lib here, inside of Auth, and similar to use current user, this will be current role, for example, and it will directly ask for the role. That's it. So that's how you can create, you know, reusable hooks and libs for Auth. So let's remove use client from here. Let's make this an asynchronous function, and let's go ahead and await current role from lib Auth. And as you can see, no errors. And we are officially able to fetch this both in server and in client components now. Perfect. So I think you've mastered, you know, how to create custom hooks and roles now. So now we're going to demonstrate how to actually create a reusable component which will protect specific content from some users. So let's go ahead and style this page a bit. So let's import card from components UI card, and I'm simply going to bring this back to use client, because I want to work with client components for this. So role is going to be use current role, like that. And I can remove this here. Great. So let's go ahead and in this card, let's give it a class name of width 600 pixels. Let's add a card header from components UI card. Let's add a paragraph, which is very simply going to use some emoji here and write admin. Let's give this a class name of text to Excel, font semi-bold, and text center. There we go. So we have a header for the admin page. And now in here, let's create a card content. And in this card content, I'm very simply going to add a class name space y4. And now I want to create a reusable component called role gate. So you're going to see how that's going to look like. And it might be useful, you know, if you're going to do a lot of stuff which is role-based access. So let's go inside of components Auth and create a new file, rolegate.tsx. It's going to be a client component which will have an interface rolegate props. It's going to accept children, which are React node. And it's going to have allowed role to be a type of user role from Prisma client. So let's export const rolegate here. Let's go ahead and destructure the props, rolegate props. We have the children and allowed role. And now let's get the current user role using use current role, which we've just created. And in here, if role is not allowed role, we're gonna go ahead and return. You can return whatever you want. I'm gonna reuse our form error component from /form error or components form error. And in here, I'm simply gonna pass a message which will say you do not have permission to view this content. Otherwise, we're simply gonna return a fragment which renders the children, which will be allowed only for the specific role. There we go. So that's how you can create a reusable component and hide some content from some users. So now let's go ahead back inside of our admin page. So app protected admin. And I just want to tell you something. I don't know if you know this or not, but I hope we kind of made it clear. The only reason this is called protected is so I organize all of my routes inside of that. It doesn't have to be called protected. You don't even have to put it inside of this folder. Right? I only do that so I can reuse the layout. So I just want to make sure that none of you are confused by that. So all of our routes are defined in here in routes.ts. You can see that we don't explicitly tell what are the private routes. All routes are private by default. We only tell the middleware what the public routes are. So if you create something random in the middle of app folder, that's going to be automatically a protected route. You don't have to put that inside of the protected folder. That just came to my attention. I hope I made that clear, right? So this protected is purely organizational. This can be named absolutely anything. All right, hope I made that clear. Let's go back inside of the admin folder here and let's actually use that role gate component. So we actually don't need use current role here at all. You can remove that. And let's go ahead inside of here and let's add role gate component from components auth role gate. So make sure you add the import for role gate here. And inside you're gonna write something that only admins will be able to see. So for example, I'm gonna add a component here, form success. So I'm gonna reuse it. And I'm gonna go ahead and write a message here to be, for example, you are allowed to see this content. And now we have to define which role can see that. So allowed role, let's import user role from Prisma client here as well. So only admin will be able to see this. And there we go. Since my role is a user, I don't have permission to view this. But if I go inside of my Prisma Studio here, and if I change my role to admin and save this right here, I hope I have my Prisma Studio running. And if I refresh here, there we go. I am now allowed to see this content. If I change it back to user and save, there we go. I don't have permission to view this content. Perfect. So our role gate is working. And now I simply want to create an example to test the API route and a server action and show you how you can protect something in there as well. So let's simply create a div here with a class name flex row items center justify between rounded LG, border, padding 3, and shadow MD. So just to make it a little bit stylish. And let's add admin only API route with a class name of text small and font medium. And let's add a button component from components UI button. So make sure you add this import. And in here, I'm going to write click to test like that. Great, and now let's copy this and paste it below, and this is going to be admin only server action. And this is going to be click to test as well. Great, now let's go ahead and let's create both of them. So first, let's go ahead and let's create an admin only API route. So let's go inside of our app folder, and inside of the API here, create a new route called admin or whatever you want. And inside route.ts. And in here, let's export asynchronous function get. And let's go ahead and by default return new next response with a status of 403. So you can use next response, which you have to import from next server, or you can just use response. I'm going to use next response. I believe the TypeScript is better for next response. right? So by default, this will always return 403. So let's go ahead back inside of our page and let's add on click to try and go to this route. So I'm gonna go inside of protected admin page and let's go ahead and create const on API route click is very simply, oops, it's going to call fetch to /API/admin dot then we're gonna get response, and then if response.ok, I'm gonna go ahead and just console log okay, else console error forbidden for now. So just this, right? And now let's try it out. So I'm gonna add on click to this button for admin only API routes, on click on API route click, and let me just prepare my console here. So when I click here, there we go, I have forbidden, you can see 403 error right here. So how do we allow this route for someone? So now this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go inside of our route here, and which method can we use inside of an API route to get the current role? Well, we can use the one which we used in server components. So this right here, which we've created, the lib folder auth, this can be used in server components, server actions, and API routes. So basically anything server side, and those hooks that we created can be used in all client side. So if you want to use this inside of your route, you can do that. So all you have to do is get const role await current role from lib auth. If role is equal user role from Prisma client.admin, in that case return new next response null with a status of 200. Like that. That's it. That is all you have to do to check the current role and if they have permission to see this. So now if I go ahead again, I'm still gonna get an error in my console log here, so let me just expand this. But if I go ahead and change my role to admin here and save and try this out again, so let me refresh, there we go, I am allowed to see the content. I will test this and there we go, I got okay, perfect. So now I just want to prettify this with toasts. So let's just go ahead and add a new component inside of here. So let me just open a new terminal. npx chat UI at latest add Sonar, or you can manually install Sonar if you've already used it before. So it's just, you know, for some toast information here. Then you have to go inside of the app folder layout here and import toaster from add/components UI Sonar, and simply add a toaster somewhere in your project. For example, I'm going to add it here. And then you can go back inside of the admin page right here. And in here, instead of doing this, we can add toast.success. You can import toast from Sonar itself, like that. So toast.success allowed API route. And in here, we're gonna do toast.error forbidden API route. There we go, like that. So when I click here, there we go, allowed API route. If I go ahead and change this back to user and click again, forbidden API route, perfect. And it is exactly the same for server action, right? So let's just try it out. So let's go ahead and create actions, admin.ts, use server, export const admin asynchronous function. And in here, let's get the role using await current role. If role is equal to user role.admin, we're going to return, actually we can, we can do this, return error forbidden. Otherwise, let's return success allowed, like this. Make sure you've marked it as use server here. Go back to the page here, and in here, let's do const on server action click. So that's gonna tell the admin. Make sure you import admin from actions admin like that. Then we're gonna get the data. If data.error, toast.error, data.error. If data.success, toast.success, data success. As simple as that. And let's use the on server action click here for this button. So admin only server action. And let's try it out. So I should be getting an error for the server action. There we go. Oh, I'm not getting an error. Let's see what's going on. Maybe I have to refresh. No, I'm still allowed. All right, so we're gonna check that out. So admin, if role is user role.admin. Oh, my apologies. This is allowed. And this one is forbidden. My apologies, I did the opposite logic. So let's try it out now. There we go, forbidden server action. And yeah, let's also change just the results. So this is a success and this is an error like that. Okay, sorry about that. There we go. So now forbidden server action. If I go in my Prisma Studio and change my role to admin and save and try the server action again. There we go, allowed server action. Perfect, so now you know how to use our reusable hooks, reusable components, and reusable libs inside of server actions, route handlers, server components, and client components. All that's left is to create the settings page so I can show you how you can create some best practices for change password, for example, where user has to verify their password first, how to change email, and we're also going to create a little toggle to turn two-factor authentication on or off. Great job. So let's go ahead and let's learn how to update the settings and how to update the active session of this user, because just modifying the database is not enough. We also have to update all of those libs and hooks which hold the current session. So I want to start by creating a schema. Let's go inside of schemas here and let's export const settings schema, which is going to be an object. And for now, we are only gonna try and update the name field. So go ahead and add z.optional because user doesn't have to always update that name. And it's gonna be a string like that. And now let's go ahead inside of our actions and let's create a new file called settings.ts. Let's mark it as use server. Let's import everything as z from Zod. Let's import the settings schema. Let's import the database. Let's import get user by ID from data user. And let's import current user from libauth. And now let's export const settings to accept the values, which are a type of z.infer, type of settings schema. And in here, let's get the user using await current user. If there is no user, we are going to return an error, unauthorized. And we also have to turn this into an asynchronous function, so make sure that you add asynchronous here, so this await doesn't have an error. And now we checked for this user here, but let's also confirm that they actually exist in the database and it's not some leftover session. So let's do const database user is going to be await get user by ID using the user.id here. If there is no database user, we can return the exact same thing. So if there is no database user, return unauthorized like this. And then let's go ahead and let's do await database.user.update, where we have a matching ID of database user.id, and the data is simply going to spread all the values we pass. And at the end, let's go ahead and let's return success settings updated like this. So now let's go back inside of our app folder protected settings page right here, and we can remove this too. So we no longer need that. And let's go ahead and remove the imports as well. So just leave use client. And instead, let's go ahead and import from add/components UI card, the card header, and card content. Let's go ahead and replace this entire thing to use the card element. Let's max the width to 600 pixels. Let's add a card header with a paragraph, which is simply going to say settings and a little settings emoji. And let's simply style it so it looks the same as our other titles. There we go. And now inside of card content, I simply want to add a button component. So go ahead and import a button from components UI button. We're going to add a button and say update name. So for now, we're just manually going to try it like this. And let's add on click to call the settings server action. So import this. And let's manually pass in the values for name to be new name. And now let's use this on click. And let's pass on click here. And let's also import from React use transition. So I want to do this so I can see when it's pending. So const is pending, start transition from use transition. Let's wrap this inside of start transition like this. And then we can use this is pending to disable this button so we know something is going on. There we go. So open up your Prisma Studio, make sure it's running, and confirm that you have only one, that you don't have any users which have the name of a new name. So right, we're trying to update this, so make sure that you only have some other names inside of here. And now we're gonna try and click on update name here. There we go, see it completed. And now I'm gonna go ahead and refresh this. And there we go, you can see that my name in the database has updated to new name. But if I go back to my server right here, you can see that my name is still my old name tutorial. If I go into the client, my name is still my old name tutorial here. So what we have to do is we also have to manually update the session every time we change a specific field. So for that, I want to go back inside of auth.ts. And in here, this is what we're going to do. We're going to add this little console log here. I am being called again, like this. And let's go ahead and open our terminal so we can see exactly when this is being called. And this is what I want to do now. You have two options to update the session, so I'm going to show you both of those. So you can do it completely using client side inside of settings page right here. If you want to, you can do the following. You can import use session from Auth React. And then in here, you can go ahead and use this session. And you can destructure update. So what you can do is call .then here, and then manually update the session like this. So let's take a look at it now. I'm going to click save here. And once this is completed, you can see that it's being called up all the time. So it's constantly being updated. But still, even though it's being updated, you can see that my names are simply not changing. They're still staying at my old names, even though I'm obviously updating. As you can see in my database, my name is no longer tutorial. So how do I update my name? Well, we have to do the following. We have to go inside of our token here, and we have to assign the name manually. So token.name is existing user.name. And while we are here, let's also do token.email to be existing user.email. Let's also go ahead. I believe this is all we need. So name, email, role is two-factor. I think that's the only thing we're going to update from the settings. And then we have to do the same thing here. So if session.user, session.user.name is token.name. And let's also do session.user.email is token.email, like that. So let's try it out again. I'm going to go ahead here, and you can see how it immediately works now, because our token now is passing the new values, name and email. So the moment I added that, even without testing, my name has been updated. So this is what I want to do now. I want to go back to my settings page and change this to say something different. So let's confirm my name is still my old name, but if I click on update name here, wait for it to confirm, there we go. My name has been updated in real time to something different. Great, so now we are ready to actually create the form. So let me just remove the console log from my token here. We no longer need this. Do I have a console log? Okay, I no longer have a console log. Great, but just before we do that, on the settings page, we cannot show the same settings to all users, right? So if the user has logged in using Google or GitHub, we have to show them different settings, right? Because they cannot change their password, for example, because they don't have a password. They also cannot change their email because it's linked to the account model in the database. So what I want to do is I want to go back to auth.ts here, and I want to fetch the account. So let's go ahead and create data account.ts, and let's import the database from s/lib database, and let's export const get account by user ID using the user ID, which is a string. Let's make this an asynchronous function. Let's open a try and catch block. Let's return null here, and in here let's get the account using await database.account. Find first where we have a matching user ID, and let's return account like this. So make sure you have this little util. Now let's just visit our next auth.d.ts, and let's add a new field here called is or auth to be a boolean like this. And now let's go back inside of auth.ts, and inside of this token, after we confirm that we have this user, let's get the existing account using await get account by user ID, and let's pass in the existing user.id. And then what we're going to do is add a token is or auth is going to be existing account, but we are going to turn that into a boolean by adding double exclamation points at the end. And then in our session here, we can do session.user.is or auth to simply be token.is or auth. And let's add as boolean here to get rid of this TypeScript error. Great, so now we have that, and now we are ready to go back inside of our app protected settings page right here, and we are ready to create our form. So let's go ahead and import everything as z from Zod. Let's go ahead and let's import use form from React hook form. Let's go ahead and let's import Zod resolver from hook form resolvers Zod. Let's import our settings schema here from schemas. And let's go ahead and let's import everything we need from components UI form. So we are going to need the form element, the form field, form control, form item, form label, form description, and form message to show the errors. Message. And we're also going to need a separate input component from components UI input like this. Now let's go ahead and let's actually define our form to be use form. And we have to give it a type of z.infer, type of settings schema. And in here, let's go ahead and let's write a resolver to be Zod resolver and pass in the settings schema. And let's go ahead and let's give it a default values of name. That's the only one which we have defined. So for now, leave it as empty. Later, we're going to fill it with the actual user name. And let's change this on click to instead be on submit, which accepts the values, which are a type of z.infer, type of settings schema. And then we are simply going to pass in the values here inside, like that. And let's also prepare some states here. So import use state from React, so we can show the errors and success messages. So const error, set error, use state. And let's go ahead and give it a type of string or undefined. And let's do the same thing for the success message. And then in here, we're not always going to fire the update. Instead, if we have data.error, we're going to show set error to be data error. And if we have success, we're going to call the update and set success data success, like this. Great. And you can also add a .catch here manually to set error, something went wrong. So if we don't catch something in our server action, we have a fallback for this. Great. And now we can remove this here. And instead, what we can do is we can render our form element, and we can spread the form inside. And then we can add a native form element, which is going to have a class name of space y6 and on click, which is going to be form handle submit. And let me just collapse these fields. Form handle submit our on submit function. So we successfully pass those values here. Now inside of the form, let's add a self-closing tag form field, which is going to have control of form.control. It's going to have a name of name, which is the field we are trying to update. And it's going to have a render from where we are going to destructure the individual field. And then we can render the form item with the form label, which will say name. Then inside we can add a form control, and we can add our input component finally, and we can spread this field prop, which we destructured above. And let's give it a placeholder of John Doe, and we can use the disabled prop to be is pending, which we get from our start transition here, and the structure is pending here, like that. And now let's go outside. Let's go and wrap this form field inside of a div like this. And let's give it some different spacing. So space y4, because we're going to have multiple inputs inside. And outside of this div, now render a button, which is simply going to say save. And let's give it a type of submit like this. So now it's time for us to give this an actual default value. So why is this submitting when I click on it? Something seems a bit wrong. Let me just see on submit values. So this seems to be immediately submitting once I click on that. So let's see what I did wrong. Oh, it's because in the form I use on click. It should be on submit. My apologies. So in your native form, make sure you use on submit. Great. So now when I click, it doesn't submit. So now we have to fill this with the currently logged in user information. And for that, we can use our hook. So let's go ahead and get the user using use current user from hooks use current user. And in here, let's go ahead and add user !, name or undefined. So don't put an empty string, because then that will update the Prisma inside of our settings. You can see that we just spread the values. So it's going to receive name to be an empty string, and it's going to change that in the database. But if you give it explicitly undefined, then it's not even going to add name field to the values here. So that's why I want you to do it like this. And now if I refresh here, I believe I should have my name here, but I don't seem to have that. Let's see why that is happening. So I'm gonna go ahead and console log the user to see if we have some issues here. So I have my user and my name seems to be empty. I believe that's because I just submitted the name from before. Yeah, because we had that on submit function on click, and then we had a default value of an empty string which submitted it. All right, so yeah, we made a small mistake. You probably have the same thing. If you do, no worries. So let's try and change our name. So I'm gonna call this new name change, and let's go ahead and save, and let's see if that's going to update our property. So if I go to server component, there we go, new name change. Client component, new name change. Settings, new name change. If I refresh here, there we go, new name change. Perfect. You can see how now it's working just as fine. So the reason our name was empty is because by default I was holding an empty string here, and inside of this form I had on click. So when we clicked on the field, it fired a submit action and it changed the name to an empty string. So just bring it back to this, and you can freely update your name. Let's go ahead and try this one more time. If I click save here, this is going to update my name, and there we go, server and client components are updated. Great. So now I want to go ahead and actually show these errors and success messages. So let's go ahead and let's import form success from form success, and let's do the same thing for form error to be form error if we have an error in any case. And above this button here, let's enter form error and have a message of error. And let's do the same thing for form success to have a message of success. And let's give this button a disabled if is pending. So now when I update my name again, I should get a success message that everything was okay and that my settings are updated. Great. So now we have to add some fields from Части and UI so that we can update the other stuff. So let's add the fields switch and select. So inside of our terminal here, I'm going to shut down the app. I'm going to shut down my Prisma Studio. And I'm going to write npx Части and UI latest add switch. So that's going to be on or off for two-factor authentication. And after switch, we also have to add select so we can change our user role. Obviously, changing the user role in settings is just for development, right? Usually you do that using direct database access or by implementing an API to update the roles. So that's on you how you're going to handle that. So just refresh your page if you've shut down the app. And now let's go ahead back inside of our schema so that we can add those new fields properly. So let's go inside of schemas right here. And let's go ahead and let's add is two-factor enabled to be z.optional and z.boolean. Then let's go ahead and add a role to be z.enum, an array of user role from Prisma client. So make sure you add this import .admin and user role .user. And now let's add an email field to be z.optional, z.string.email. And password is going to be z.optional, z.string.minimum of 6. And a new password is going to be z.optional, it's going to be the exact same thing. And now, here's the cool thing with Zod, we can use .refine to check if the password and the new password match. So if data.password, sorry, we can, not if they match, but we can check that by default they are optional, right? But if the user enters a new password, they also have to enter their current password. So let's get data here .password. So if data.password is entered and data.new password is not entered, return false. And we can do if data.new password is entered and there is no data.old password, also return false. Otherwise return true. And we can write custom messages for that by adding a little comma here and opening up an object. So message is going to be new password is required, and path is going to be new password, right? Or you can write two defines if you want to. For example, you can chain this refine with another one, and this one is going to check if new password is written and old password is not, and then change this one to password is required and the path to be password, like that. So then you handle both cases in the refine here. Great, so we have added everything we need inside of our settings schema. So now let's go ahead and let's go back inside of our app protected settings page right here. And we have this existing form field. So now it's time for us to add a new form field to change the email. So let's copy and paste this. And let's go ahead and modify our default values for the email. You can see how now we have that to be user.email or undefined. All right, and now in here, change this one to be the name of email, to have a type of label of email. Let's change the placeholder to be johndoeexample.com, and let's give it a type of email. And now, as you can see, we have our email field here. Just refresh, and this will give you the current email that you're logged in with. So when you're testing this, make sure that you're logged in with the credentials user. So don't use Auth providers for this part. All right, so we have that. And now let's go ahead and let's add a form field for the password. So let's copy this. The name is going to be password, and we're going to have a password here. And let's go ahead and give this a type of password. And let's go ahead and give it a placeholder of 123456, like this. And by default, let's add password to be undefined. So we're not going to fill the password because we don't have the user's password. We only have the hash. So by default, we're going to put it as undefined, meaning if user saves this form, we are not going to update the password at all. So this is for the password field, and now we have to copy this field and paste it, and this one has to be new password. So this is going to be new password. And let's go ahead and modify that as well. So new password is also undefined, like this. There we go. So now we have the fields to update the name, the email, the password, and the new password. So now what we have to do is we have to create a form which is going to be able to change the role for. So in order to do that, we have to import some things from our new component which we added called select, UI select. So just confirm that you've added that, right? We added npx chassis UI select and switch. Make sure you run those commands. So in here, import select, select content, select item, select trigger, and select value. And now we can go back and actually create this. So let's copy the last form field, which is the new password form field. Let's change this one to have a name of role, and let's clear up the form item. So let's just add form label, which is going to be role. And then inside, we're going to use the select component. And let's give it a prop disabled of is pending. Let's give it on value change to be field on change. And let's give it a default value of field.value. And inside, let's open up a form control. And let's add a select trigger with a select value, which is going to be a placeholder of select a role. Outside of select trigger, outside of form control, add a select content, which is going to have select item, which is going to have, it's not going to be a self-closing tag, so like this. The string is going to be admin as an option, and we have to pass in the value to be user role, which we can import from Prisma client, so make sure that you import this. So this one is going to select admin, and then you can copy and paste this, and this one will select user. And the label is going to be user like this. Great, so now you can see that we have an option to select the role, perfect. So let's go ahead inside of our default values here, and let's add the role. So role is going to be user role or undefined as well, like that. So when I refresh here, I believe this should be pre-selected. For me, it's admin. I might have changed it from the last time. Also, if the form is too big for you, if you can't scroll up or down, you can just zoom out. You know, I'm not really making this responsive or anything. Great. So one thing I've noticed we are missing is the form message, which will show an error. So we are not using the form message anywhere, as you can see. So let's go ahead and simply add it to the fields we need. So first we have the name field. So outside of form control, add form message. So this will handle any errors. And let's do the same thing for the email outside of form control. For the password, same thing. And for the new password, same thing. And finally for here we have to put it, I'm not exactly sure where. I think we can just do it outside of select like this. So now, for example, if I enter a password, there we go, you can see that new password is required. Or if I do the opposite thing, let me refresh. If I do the opposite thing and enter this password, then the password is required. So our refine is working quite nicely. Great. And there's a last field which we have to allow for updating, which is the two-factor authentication. So for that, we have to import switch component. So import switch from components UI switch. And let's go down here and copy this field, form field, new password. So this one with the item label control, because the select, you can see that it's quite custom, right? So gonna have to modify it. And let's change the name of this one to be is two-factor enabled, like that. And let's go ahead now and let's modify this a bit. So I'm gonna remove everything inside of form item here, and I'm gonna give this form item a class name of flex row, item center, justify between, rounded large, border, padding 3, and shadow SM. And then inside I'm gonna open up a div with a class name space y.5. And I'm gonna add a form label component to say two-factor authentication. And in here I'm gonna add form description to say enable two-factor authentication for your account. And outside of this div, we can add a form control and simply render the switch component inside. It's a self-closing tag. And let's give it a disabled prop of is pending, a checked of field.value, unchecked change to field on change, like this. There we go. We can now modify this and we can save all of those things. But obviously we have to modify our settings a bit, because right now I can change my email to whatever I want without any confirmation. Same thing for the password. We are not exactly checking if they are matching. So let's go ahead and revisit our settings action and let's modify it so that it can actually handle all of those different changes, because when we enter a new password, we have to hash that password, right? And let's go ahead and do the following. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check if the user who is trying to change these fields is logged in using credentials or if they're logged in using Auth. So in here, after we check that we have a database user, let's check if user is Auth. Let's go ahead and do the following. Values.email, which is a field they should not update, is automatically going to be undefined. Values.password will be undefined. Values.new password will be undefined. And values that is two-factor enabled is going to be undefined. So these are the fields that Auth users cannot modify because their email is handled by the provider, they don't have a password, and two-factor is also handled by their provider. So it makes sense that if we disable those fields in the API or the server action, we also hide those fields from them right here on the client side. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to find the field which I don't want to show. So we don't want to show the email and the password. So let's find where the email starts right here. And let's do if user is Auth is equal to false, then we're going to show this form field which has the email, this form field which has the password, and this form field which has the new password. So all the way until we get to the role. So obviously we have an error because we don't have a parent component, so wrap the entire thing inside of a fragment, all the way to the end here of the new password. And then if you want to, you can indent that so it looks a little bit better, like this. So right now, everything should look exactly the same, right? So I'm going to log out and I'm going to log in using my GitHub. And now those fields should be hidden from me because I'm logged in using Auth. Looks like they're not hidden. That's very interesting. Oh, let me just refresh this. Perhaps the logout didn't work exactly as expected. So let me try logging in again because I logged in as I stayed logged in as the previous user. There we go. Now when I'm in Auth, you can see that I can only see my name and my role. And I should also hide the two-factor authentication. So let's do that as well. I'm just going to copy this query here. I'm going to find my field for the two-factor authentication, and I'm only going to render it if Auth is false. So right here to the end, like this. And then I can indent that as well. And no need for a fragment here because it's a single field. There we go. So Auth users should only be able to update their name and their role. Perfect. So I suggest that you log out now and log in back to your credentials, so we can continue developing our settings. Great, so you can see how we have much more options here as credentials. And in here, we confirm that if client side somehow fails and they send updates for this, we will never allow them to update those. Great, so now we have to do the logic if the user is trying to update their email. So if values.email and if values.email is not the same as user.email, so we are only going to send a new verification token if the user is trying to update an email which is different from what it was before. So let's do const existing user to be await get user by email from data user. So we have to confirm that the email they are changing to isn't used by another user. So values.email. If we have an existing user by that email, we are going to return an error, which is going to say email already in use. And we also have to confirm that we are not that user. So existing user, and if existing user.id is not the same as our user ID. So now, if I try and use an email from my other account, I believe I should get back an error because I'm trying to take someone else's account. There we go. So email already in user. So what I meant to say was email already in use. There we go. So you can see how that now has switched, is protecting my other user. So try going to your database and take a look at another email that you have and try to use it here. And you should be prevented from updating to that email. There we go. You can see how when I refresh, it's back to normal. Great. And now if we pass all of that verification, we have to create a new token for them to verify. So const verification token is simply going to be await generate verification token from lib tokens right here. Make sure you import that and pass in values.email so we know to which email to send that. And then let's do await send verification email. So make sure you add this import from libmail. And in here, we're going to pass verification token.email as the first argument and verification token as the second argument, like that. And let's break this function and let's write success verification email sent, like this. So if I try to update my email to something else, gmail.com, in production, this is going to send the email verification to this email. There we go, verification email sent. Right now, this email is not being sent because remember, we have to add a domain to resend so that we can send emails to anyone else. Great, so we just handled the case for emails, but how about for passwords? So we have to do the same thing for passwords now before we update it. So if values.password and if values.new password, and if the database user has a password at all, in that case, first we have to check if they have entered a correct password. So const passwords match is going to be await bcrypt. So let's import bcrypt. Again, you can use bcrypt or bcrypt.js. I'm going to use bcrypt.js here. Bcrypt.compare values.password with the database user password, which is a hash. So we are going to know whether the password is correct or not without actually knowing what is the password. So if the passwords don't match, we're going to return an error, incorrect password, like this. Otherwise, we have to hash the new password. So hashed password is going to be await bcrypt.hash values new password and 10 salt rounds, like this. And then we can manually modify values.password, which will be updated here in the database to be the new hashed password. And let's do values new password to be undefined because we don't even have that field in our database. Great job. So now if I try and enter a wrong password here and try to update some other password, I believe I should get an error because I don't have a matching password, right? So let's try this out. Let me just refresh here. Should I have gotten an error here? I believe I should have. So let's try it one more time. So password here, I'm going to change this to something wrong. My new password. Let's click save here. And there we go. Now I have incorrect password. So just make sure you refresh, because if you have that email here, then it's going to send you a verification for that email. But now if I try and use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and my new password is going to be 654321, let's click save. And then I should get settings updated like this. Great. And obviously we have to remove the error from when we submit. So let me try and log out now, and let me try tutorial mailing@gmail.com. Let me try my old password 1234556. So if I try to log in with that, wrong, 654321. If I try to log tutorial mailing@gmail.com, if I try to log in with this, so my new password, there we go. It is officially working. Perfect. And now let's just confirm that our roles are working. So right now I am an admin, but if I change this to user and if I click save, let's see what's going to happen. There we go. I don't have permission to view this, and I should get forbidden API route. In here I'm getting forbidden server action. If I change it back to an admin and click save and then try again, there we go, allowed API route and allowed server action. And lastly, let's change two-factor authentication. So you know that I just logged out and logged in without two-factor enabled. So let's try enabling this now, and let's click save to see if we're going to get any errors or if this is going to work just fine. So if I refresh here or simply go to the server, for example, there we go, two-factor authentication is now on. Perfect. So let me go ahead and log out, and let me try and log in. So tutorial mailing@gmail.com. 1, 2, 3, no, wrong password, 654321, because I changed my password. So let's try that out. Now it should prevent me from logging in, and it does. Perfect. And I have a new email. Remember, this one only lasts 5 minutes, so make sure you enter this fast. Let's go ahead and confirm it. And if this is still working, I should be redirected back to my settings page, and looks like I am. Great job. And looks like one thing here is not updating correctly. So my two-factor authentication seems to not be updating here. So it's on here, but here it's off. Oh yeah, I think inside of our page we forgot to add the default value for that. Yes, we don't have a default value for two-factor authentication. So let's add is two-factor enabled, user is two-factor enabled, or undefined. Like that. So I think that now when I refresh here, there we go. You can see how now it's turned on. Great. So everything is working just fine. I think this was a very cool exercise. We did a big project, but we exclusively focused on, you know, mastering next out and all the ways you can do things. So yeah, about this update thing, I'm not even sure if you need it or not. So it's very inconsistent on my part. I actually, when I developed this the first time, I did not need to do this. So I didn't need to manually update my name and email every time in these sessions and callbacks. So it's very inconsistent. I'm not sure how it works, but this is, you know, a bulletproof way for you to know that it's been updated. But it's always updated once you log out and log in. And here's another thing that you can do. So you don't have to update on the client. You can also extract update from here. And then let's go back inside of app protected settings page. Let's remove the update from here and let's remove the import of use session here. We no longer need that. So let me find, there you go, remove this import. Let's go back inside of our actions settings. So imagine if this is your route handler, you can do this as well. So you can now also import update from Auth, I believe. And then simply at the end of this thing, after you update the user in the database, call the update here manually. Or maybe this is not how it's working. So perhaps I need to do this const user like that, or let's call this new user, updated user. And then in here, name updated user.name. Is this working? Wait, what is this accepting? It's accepting a user. Oh, so I have to write the user manually, and then name is going to be updated user.name, email updated user.email. What else do we have? Is two-factor enable, updated user is two-factor enabled. And we also have role, updated user, role. So you can do it like this if you want as well. Is that all the fields we have? Let me just quickly check. We also have the password, yes. So, but I mean, password really doesn't matter. You don't even have to update that. Yeah, we don't store that in our session. So I think that this should still be working now. So if I try changing my name, let's try update server test and click save here. I think this should still work just as fine. Let's go ahead and see. There we go. So name is update server test. Yeah, you can see how, you can see how on client, it didn't update. Yeah, so maybe it's not the perfect solution. So yeah, you can see there's a lot of things you have to take care of when working with Nextout. It's obviously a great library, but yeah, sometimes it's just a little bit inconsistent. So yeah, bring back use session here in the settings page, bring back the use session hook and call the update here. And then, well, you can leave it here as well if you want to update it from the server side as well. Great, so we've wrapped that up. What's left is to deploy our actual application. So deployment is pretty easy. The only thing that we have to take care of is the Google and GitHub callbacks. So before we wrap up our Auth masterclass, I want to talk about this video's sponsor, Clerk. You've probably seen me use Clerk in a lot of tutorials that I have, primarily because it's so easy and so fast to implement. So before we wrap up, I want to show you how quickly we can do with Clerk what took us 7 hours to do with Nextout. So I'm going to give my application a name, Auth Masterclass or Auth Tutorial. I'm going to select email address, Google, and I'm going to select GitHub as the options to log in. I'm going to click Create Application, and I'm going to copy my environment keys. So I'm going to go ahead in this new project that I created, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new .environment file like this, .environment, and I will paste those keys here. Then I'm going to go ahead and continue in documentation where I have to install this package. So I'm going to go inside of my terminal here, and I'm going to install the package. We already set the environment keys, so we don't have to do that. All I have to do is add Clerk Provider inside of my app layout. So let's go ahead and do that here. I'm going to go inside of app, layout right here. I'm going to import the clerk provider, and I'm simply going to wrap the entire app inside of clerk provider like this. Let's go ahead and see what I have to do next. I'm going to go ahead and add a middleware. So I'm going to create a new file inside of my project called the middleware. And I'm going to paste the snippet from the documentation right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and skip to the bottom to create custom sign-in and sign-up pages. So I'm going to go ahead and create the following folder structure here. Inside of my app folder, I'm going to create a new route called sign up. And then I'm going to create another catch-all route, sign up. And inside, I'm going to create page.tsx. And in here, I'm going to paste this code snippet like that. I'm going to copy and paste this and rename it to sign in. And I'm going to rename the inside route to sign in as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy the other snippet for the sign in like this. And then I have to update my environment variables with those new routes which we've just created. So let me paste that here. And now let's go ahead and let's run our app. So make sure that I have npm run dev. I believe I already have that right here. I will refresh my page right here. And I will be redirected to the login right here. There we go. I can use GitHub, I can use Google, or I can sign up using the email address and the password. And this will come with validation, with two-factor authentication, email verification, absolutely everything. So let me go ahead and create a new GitHub account here. And now let me show you how easy it is to fetch the current user session. So I'm going to go inside of my app folder. I'm going to go inside of page.tsx here. I'm going to remove absolutely everything from here. And the only thing I'm going to render is my user button component. So let's go ahead and import user button from @clerk/next.js. And let's save this right here. And as you can see, there we go. I have a user button, and from here I can manage my entire account by changing my email. I can even connect a new linked account. I can add a password. I can check my active devices. I can delete my account, and inside of my dashboard here, I can control how many users I have, and I can also ban the users, impersonate users, visit their profile, and also delete the users. And let me show you how we can easily create a public route. For example, I'm going to create a new folder public right here and page.tsx. And I'm simply going to call this a public page with a div. This route is public to everyone. All I have to do is go inside of my middleware, and I simply have to add public routes /public. That's it. So now what I can do is I can log out from my account here and demonstrate to you that I can go directly to localhost 3000 /public, and there we go. This route is public to everyone, but if I go to any other route, I have to log in again. So as you can see, it took us 5 minutes to implement with Clerk what took us 7 hours to implement with Auth. So that's why I love to use Clerk inside of my tutorials. It's extremely simple to implement, it is extremely secure, and it is an absolutely great deal, and I'm very thankful that they've been sponsoring my channel from the earliest videos and allowing me to create so much free content. And now let's go back to wrapping up our tutorial. So before we deploy our project, I just want to go ahead and add a couple of improvements inside of our app. So sign out of your application, and yeah, here's one thing: whenever you're signing out, make sure that you don't have 2 tabs open of the same application, because then you're kind of not going to be signed out completely. So just always make sure when you sign out using Auth that you only have 1 tab open of your session. Otherwise, it's just going to be a little bit weird. So sign out of your application, make sure that you can see the login screen, and let's go to localhost 3000 where we can find the sign in button. And in here, what we have to do is we have to install a dialog component. So let's go ahead and shut down the app and run npx chatcnui at latest, add dialog like this. So this will add the dialog component inside of our app. Let's do npm run dev. And then let's go back inside of components, Auth right here. And let's go inside of the login button. And now we have to handle this case if mode is model, right? So we can do that by importing the dialog. So let's go ahead and import everything we need from /components UI dialog. So we need the dialog itself, we need the dialog content, and we need the dialog trigger like this. And then inside of this mode model, all we have to do is render the dialog. Then we have to render the dialog trigger. And well, let's give this dialog trigger our as child prop. And inside we're simply going to render the children. And then dialog content is gonna render our login form from /login form or components auth login form. So that's how easily we can reuse our form. So if you want to do the same thing for register, feel free to do that. And let's just give this a class name of padding 0 with auto, bg transparent, and border none. So now if we go back to page.tsx where we use our login button and change the login button mode to model, we can go ahead and click sign in. And let me just refresh my page to confirm that this is up to date. Yeah, if you shut down your app, make sure you run it again. And there we go. Now it's in a model. And to fix these hydration errors, which we have, all we have to do is also pass the prop as child right here. There we go. So now no errors. And you can see that I am opening this inside of a model instead of a redirect. So if I remove this mode and click sign in, then it will redirect me to the page. Great. So we have that covered. Now here's another thing that I want to cover. So currently when I log in into a specific page right here, and when I get redirected, if I go for example into admin and if I log out, in my URL, it just says /out/login. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell me what's the last place I visited, so that when I log in back again, it will redirect me back to that path. So let's go ahead and visit our middleware.ts where we can modify that. So find this if clause, if we are not logged in and if this is a public route. And in here, let's define let callback URL to be next URL.pathname. And then if next URL already has a search, let's do callback URL plus equals next URL.search. And then let's encode our callback. So encoded callback URL is equal to encode URI component with the callback URL. And all we have to do is append that to this new URL here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's change this to use backticks. And let's add a question mark and encoded callback URL query. So now make sure that you're logged out. So when you refresh, it should not show you the settings. If you log out and it's showing you the settings page again, it means that you have another tab open of this page. So make sure you close all tabs and then log out. So now I'm logged out. And if I manually go to /settings, you can see that I'm redirected back, but this time I have a query from where I came from. So if I try to access admin, now that is saved in the URL. So when I log in, I will be redirected back to that page. So what we have to do is we have to use that callback URL inside of our login form. So let's go inside of components. Let's go inside of auth, login form right here. And let's go ahead. We already have the search params. Great. So now, besides the URL error, let's also get the callback URL to be search params.get callback URL inside of our URL. And then we can pass that as the second argument of the login server action, like this. And let's go ahead and go inside of login here. And the values are going to be the first argument, but the second argument is going to be the callback URL, which is going to be optional and a type of string. And then we can go ahead and add that to the redirect to. So callback URL or the default login redirect. So that's why we use that here. So let me try this out now. So tutorial mailing@gmail.com 654321. I have two-factor authentication on, so I'm going to get an email. So usually once I log in, I'm redirected to the settings page. But now, since I have this inside of my URL, once I confirm this two-factor token, I should be redirected back to the admin page. So let's just try that out if it works. So it looks like I made some mistake here. So let's go ahead and see what I did wrong. Callback URL here. How about I try logging out and console logging the callback URL right here. Oh, I think what we did wrong inside of our middleware here is that we forgot to add the callback URL here. So make sure that in your response redirect new URL, you add the callback URL like this. So let's try it out now. So make sure you're logged out. Let's attempt to enter admin, for example. And there we go. Now you can see how our query has the callback URL. And it seems like we are having this little type error here in the login. So let's change this to be string or null. There we go. That will resolve the TypeScript error. So if I try this again, tutorial mailing@gmail.com 654321, and I log in, I'm going to get a new two-factor authentication code now. There we go. Let's go ahead and use this. And now I should be redirected back to /admin instead of /settings, because that's the last page I visited or attempted to visit while I was logged out. And there we go. It's finally working. Perfect. So now we just have to do the same thing for the social buttons here. So let's go ahead and try that out. So go inside of your components out and find the social button here. And in here, you can do the same thing. So import use search params from next navigation here. Get the search params from use search params, and then get the callback URL to be search params.get callback URL. And finally, you can do this here. So callback URL or the default login redirect. So if I try logging in with GitHub now, I should also be redirected to /admin instead of /settings. There we go. Perfect. But there is one more thing we have to take care of, and that is inside of our mail library. So in here, we are hard-coded to localhost. So we have to change that to dynamically use our environment variable. So let's go inside of .environment and let's create next public app URL to be HTTP localhost 3000. So don't add a / at the end. So just localhost 3000 and make sure it's HTTP. And then let's go ahead inside of here and let's add const domain to be process.environment.next public app URL. And then we're simply going to change this from, instead of being hard-coded, to use the domain variable. So domain /out/new password, which will translate to localhost 3000 /out new password. So later when we deploy, we can easily change the environment variable to our new deployed URL. So let me just try this out. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to log in. And now I should get an email and the redirect link. Oh, sorry, this is two-factor out, not this. The new. Let's try new password. So let's try new password. So now I should get the new email being sent here. But let's see if it's gonna lead us to undefined or to localhost. There we go. It's still working. It's leading us to localhost. Perfect. So we've wrapped up everything we need for our app. Make sure again that you're only using one application open for this tutorial. Great. So we've wrapped up the entire tutorial. Now it's time to deploy. So the first thing we have to do is we have to create a new repository in the GitHub. So I'm going to give this tutorial next 14 Auth masterclass. I'm going to make this a private repository and I'm going to go ahead and click create repository. Then what we have to do is go inside of our terminal here and we can shut down the app and run git add and then git commit. And I'm going to go ahead and call this, for example, deployment. And I'm going to now run these 3 commands which we have. So this is if it's a new repository and this is if it's an existing repository. So let's use these 3 commands here, copy them and paste them here. And after you push, and when you refresh this project right here, project deployed, sorry, not deployed, you should see it in GitHub right here. Perfect. So now let's go ahead to vercel.com. Let's click add new project, and let's select our new GitHub repository. And now we have to assign the environment variables. So let's go to .environment like this, and let's copy everything and let's paste them inside. So obviously we're gonna have to change the next public app URL, but we can only do that once we deploy. So I'm going to click deploy, I'm gonna pause the video, and we're gonna see if I get any errors. If we do, we're gonna go ahead and fix them together. So I got an error with my deployment, and I believe I know why. Yeah, I forgot to add that we need to initialize our Prisma client. So let's go ahead and go inside of package.json here. And in here, let's add a post install script, and let's run Prisma generate. And here's another tip for you. If you don't want to wait until Vercel does the build, you can manually do npm run build. So this is not going to deploy or anything. This is just locally going to attempt to build. So run this, and we're going to see if we have any problems here, so we don't have to wait for Vercel. And there we go. Here, it looks like everything is okay. So now what we have to do is we have to redeploy. We can do that very easily with Vercel. All we have to do is run git add, git commit. I'm going to call this fix, and git push. And once you push, the new deployment is going to automatically start. So if you take a look at here, go inside of your projects here, select the new project. And in here, if you look at the deployments tab, you can see that it's building a new one right here. So you can click on it, and then you can expand it again. And there we go. This time it was successful, and you can see our page right here. So let me just go ahead and expand this. I want to go to the root of my project in the project so I can get the actual domain. So don't use the deployment domain, use the actual domain right here. So when I visit this, there we go. We have our login here, but our GitHub and Google are not going to work. So let's go ahead and do the following. Copy the URL like this one, and let's go back inside of your GitHub Auth, where you defined your client secret right here. You can find, in the beginning of the tutorial where I did that. Change the homepage URL to be that new page and replace the \. And now you have to change the authorization callback URL as well. There we go. So your new domain URL /API auth callback GitHub. And go ahead and click update application. And you don't have to update the keys. So just make sure that you have those new URLs here. And then you have to do the same thing in the Google Cloud. So find your project, go into credentials here. Let's go inside of web client. Let's change the URL to be that, remove the \. And in here, also replace this to go to /API auth callback Google with this URL here. And let's go ahead and click save here as well. And now you have to go to the OAuth consent screen right here. And in here, you have to add, let me close this. You have to add, where is it? So click edit app, and you have to add authorized domain. So for me, it automatically added this domain right here the moment I added the credentials. So just confirm that in your authorized domain, you have that domain, and you can just confirm and save and continue. Great. So now let's go ahead and try it out now. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to log in with GitHub here. Let's see if that's going to work now. So there we go. I'm logged in. Perfect. And let me try Google. And there we go. Google is working as well. Perfect. Great. So you officially deployed. What we have to do now, well, if you want to, you can continue watching the video where I'm going to show you how you can add the domain to resend so that you can send emails to anyone, and so that inside of your lib mail.ts you can change the from to be from whatever domain you want. For that, you're going to need to purchase a domain, right? You can find very cheap ones for, I believe, $5. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to purchase a domain, and I'm going to show you how to change the DNS settings. So there we go. You can see you can find very cheap ones. So I'm going to go ahead and purchase this one, and then I'm going to show you how to modify the DNS settings. So after you've purchased a domain or used whatever domain you want, go ahead and go to Recent, go inside of your account, go to Domains, and I'm going to go ahead and add this domain. So Auth Masterclass Tutorial right here. I'm going to click Add. And now we have to add this DNS records, and then we have to verify them. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead, go inside of your DNS. I'm using GoDaddy, and let's click Add a new record. So the type is MX for the first one, I believe. The host is send. And let's go ahead and copy the value right here to be the value. Let me zoom out so you can see. And the priority, it says 10. So let's copy 10 as well. Like that. And let's add more records. So the second one is txt. It's also send. So txt, send. And the value is this one. And let's add one more domain, also txt. This is the name and this is the value. And let's click Save All Records. So make sure you've added all of those to your DNS right here. And then what you can do is go ahead and click on Verify DNS Records. Sometimes it can take a couple of minutes, maybe even hours for DNS to propagate. So this is quite optimistic of me trying immediately. So if it doesn't work immediately, I'm going to wait a couple of minutes and then try verifying again. If it's still not working, perhaps we did something incorrectly. But it's just a matter of copying these values and adding them to your DNS records. So this is the same process if you're using any other. I'm using GoDaddy simply because I know how to use it and access the DNS settings. You can use Namecheap, Vercel, whatever you want to do, wherever you add your DNS variables. So I'm just going to pause the video and see where this is going. There we go. So my domain was officially verified. And what we can do now is we can send the domains, we can send emails using that domain. So let's go back inside of our lib folder mail right here. And I'm going to change this to send from, for example, you can do anything you want. I'm going to use mail@authmasterclasstutorial.com. So from now on, that's going to be my from domain. Let's go ahead and change that here. And let's go ahead and change that here. So I'm going to go ahead and first attempt this locally if it's working, and then we're going to go ahead and deploy again. So I'm going to npm run dev here. And I should also be able to send emails to anywhere now, not just my logged in account. So we're going to attempt to do all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. I'm going to use tutorialmailing@gmail.com. 654321, and I'm going to check my email now. And let's check my email, and there we go. You can see that the name is mail and it's coming from mail@authmasterclass.com. So we officially linked our mail. What I want to try now is whether we can send the emails to some other mail. So let's try that by creating an account. So I'm going to call this test. And I'm going to go ahead and use, I don't know, something at example.com. So I think this should fail now, but I still believe that we should see it inside of our resend as something that has failed. So let me just go ahead and refresh. And there we go. You can see how now we can send emails to any account that you want, any email that you want. Perfect. So this is now full on production. Everything is working. And to push that to production, all you have to do is do git add, git commit. Let's add domain and git push, and that's going to re-trigger the deployment. But we didn't even add anything here, right? Except changing our mail, of course, to use this one. So you can do anything. You can make this send, you can make this whatever you want. All that matters is that you have your domain here. Perfect. Great job. You've wrapped up the entire tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and watch my other videos if you like them. So just one thing that I forgot to cover. If you use the domain right here from Vercel, and for example, if you try to log in, use your password and get the two-factor authentication token, the domain that will be sent to you, sorry, not this one, new password. Let's try this again. So new password for tutorialmailing@gmail.com. We forgot to change the environment variable of next public app. So let me just wait for this to come. There we go. And when I click here, you can see that it leads me to localhost 3000 instead of this domain. So it's quite an easy fix. We just have to copy the URL. We have to go inside of the settings of the project, inside of environment variables here, and we have to find next public app URL. So right now you can see it's localhost. So our mail system is going to add URL links with that. So just change it, not with the slash, to go to HTTPS your Vercel link, and don't put a slash at the end, and click save. And after that, you have to go in your deployments, select the last deployment and click redeploy like that. And then we're going to demonstrate this again just to prove that it is working. All right, the app has been deployed. So I'm going to visit it on Vercel again, and I'm going to send myself an email. And let's just confirm that this time the URL link is correct. So let's see if this is the correct email. Looks like it is. So this time when I click here, I'm redirected to the correct website. Perfect. So that's it. We've wrapped up the entire tutorial. We fixed the bugs. We enabled resend. We enabled absolutely everything. Thank you so much for watching one more time, and see you in the next tutorial.